trading in one thing for another. In the immortal words of those political prognosticators at Fox News, fair and balanced? We'll see. That's next on this episode of the Gratitude Journal podcast.
This is the Gratitude Journal podcast.
It's an absolutely spectacular day here in Northeast Ohio as we record this episode of the Gratitude Journal podcast. And by we, I guess I mean me, myself, and I, because it's not like I have a producer on the other side of the board and I'm in some fancy office complex. So I'll say, as I record this episode of the Gratitude Journal podcast on a beautiful, breathtakingly gorgeous day. Matthew here, and yes, it is sunny with blue sky, very little wind. I know this because I did my short Sunday meditative walk and remarked to myself how absolutely brilliant it was, and I'll get to more of that here in just a little bit. It's been a busy summer, and which probably explains my absence, but I'm not even going to go there. I'm just going to say that a number of things have gotten in the way, and some of those things have lightened up a bit. Not that they've been solved, but it has given me the opportunity to sit in front of the microphone and talk to you and check back in and hopefully find ways, as is the normally customary process in this podcast, to find things to be grateful for or things that maybe we weren't aware of that we should be grateful for, which really happens to be a much more commonplace thing for me when I can find them. So that's the purpose of today's episode, and hopefully the purpose of every episode. I remarked way back when, during my last episode, which, when was that recorded? Like 2012, that I was working on a sort of a video version of this, and we're almost there. I've been trying to sort of construct a set that I can use in some ways and to get the necessary things that I think make a set look good, and more importantly, make a set sound good, so that hopefully I can repurpose some of that audio and upload those as episodes on the podcast and kind of, I don't like killing, but for want of better words, to kill two birds with one stone, or to maim them in such a way that they go on living. Okay, that was bad. But I'm not even going to go into absences. It's just not really something that serves any purpose. I'll just say that it's good to be back in front of the microphone on this Sunday morning in a relatively cool space here in the basement lair. It has been busy medically because I had this ablation done on my heart and it didn't really work yet. I say that because I'm led to believe that these things may take time, and I was misinformed because after the procedure, due to this really excessive lightheadedness that I've been experiencing really over the past year, I can recall doing a summer walk in the neighborhood and at one point hanging on to someone's fence because it kind of felt like I was going to pass out. And I thought for a while it was because I was having an adverse reaction to a medication. And then I realized that maybe it was something a little deeper. So without boring you with all the long details, after trying a couple of medications for these PVCs, premature ventricular contractions, and having multiple EKGs and multiple stress tests and multiple heart ultrasounds, it was advised for me to have this procedure done. And so I had this procedure done. It's not a procedure I'd want to go through again. I was totally awake for all of it, and I'll spare you the gory details, but it kind of hurt. And, I kind of assumed that the next day that I would wake up feeling, 100%. And I remember laying there in recovery thinking, man, I can't wait to wake up tomorrow so I can feel better. And it just hasn't been the case. Now, I feel a little less lightheaded on some days, but it's still there. So I'm led to believe that these things take time to quote unquote take. And I guess that's what I have to take away from this experience so far. While I was on my walk this afternoon, I remember this was the kind of day for optimum motorcycle riding. And in a perfect world, as I was walking down the street and somebody on an orange Harley Davidson Roadmaster went past me, I thought this would have been the day where I would have sent Brad a text and I would have said, hey, meet me in Navarre, which is just southwest of Canton. And I would have said, let's meet and travel down into Amish country. I would have fueled up. I would have received my mate's blessing. I would have geared up properly. And I would have set out on my Triumph Tiger 800 and traversing some of the back roads to make it into Navarre, where I would have met up with Brad, who had already been sucking down a cup of coffee at a Starbucks, and we would have enjoyed one together before we embarked out on our journey. Brad was normally the trail boss, and because he was a little more familiar with those roads, living in that area, even though that's near my hometown, and we would have basically spent the day carousing and carousing the back roads of Northeast Ohio, traveling down to Millersburg and Charm and Amish country, maybe stopping somewhere to get a bite to eat, and sort of hanging out with other riders and talking about each other's bikes and talking about each other's routes and having group pictures taken, and then making my way slowly but surely back home, where I would just basically have a day where there was nothing as a goal and there was nothing really to do. And I experienced an extremely large chasm of emptiness on my walk this morning because I so miss the experience of riding a motorcycle. And in particular, riding a motorcycle with no agenda. Nowhere to go. If that left looked appealing, I would take it. Where does this road go? I don't really know. I kind of know where I'm at, so I don't get lost. And at the same time, wow, I've never seen that house before. And boy, they need to work on these roads. Or, wow, these roads are amazing. I love it. These roads are a little too curvy for my speed today. Or, man, these straightaways, I wish there was a little bit of undulations in them. That manure smells great. Or, hey, there's an ice cream place I've never tried. It was just a whirlwind of things that made the joy of riding just that, such a joy. And I thought to myself, well, can anything replace this now that I no longer own a motorcycle? And this is the second summer now that I have not been on one. And the answer unequivocally is no. There is no substitute for that. I think I've mentioned in previous podcasts, too, that other people have said, why don't you get a convertible? And I've been in a convertible. They're great. I mean, a day like today with the top down, that would have been an extraordinary experience as well. But that is like comparing apples and oranges. That, in fact, even a better comparison, it's like having relations with a prophylactic on versus having relations without one. I'm sorry, that sounded, a little like maybe too much, but it's the only way that I can describe it. I mean, they're really not in the same ballpark at all. And so I would say, in answer to my own question, no, there is nothing to compare. But it does bring up a larger topic, I suppose, for, say, somebody who has worked a particular job and maybe has been forced out of that job into retirement, and they really enjoyed that job, and now they have to try to find something to replace that. Can they find something that replicates that? And for some people, the answer may be no. Or let's say you've lived in a particular part of the country and you are used to certain things and you have to move to another part of the country. Can you find things to replicate that? And maybe in some ways, yes, but maybe that experience can never be replicated. And so I go in with my eyes wide open, saying to myself, really, there is nothing legitimate that can substitute for the thrill of riding around a corner, coming up out of a corner uphill, pulling back the throttle, and just feeling the rumble of life beneath you, knowing that you are transformed into a state of half bliss and half abject terror because you are on two wheels with no protection other than the proper gear that you're wearing on the outside. I have this kind of ritual on Sunday morning. Well, I would say that it's kind of a ritual just about every morning. That I cut up the fruit for Donna's morning fruit salad, and then I use a portion of that in the smoothie that I make in my Vitamix blender. So when I secured my new position to supplement some of the things I do for clients, I told myself one of my first purchases was a Vitamix blender, and they're expensive. So I went to sort of a second tier site that sold refurbished blenders, and I found a smaller one that works really quite well for us, and I've really enjoyed it. I have had to replace the canister already because I kind of nudged it against the counter, and when I complained to Vitamix that I kind of messed up and what would it take for me to get a new one, I had this very kind person who basically just shipped one in the mail to me totally free of charge. So then I came to find out that Vitamix blenders have a lifetime warranty, and they should because they're expensive. And just to cart it from one part of the kitchen to the other and plug it in, it's kind of a heavy beast. At any rate, I make these smoothies for us, and as I was chopping her salad and chopping the tops off of the strawberries, I began to think about how much effort should go into the things we do. And sometimes I have to admit that it gives me great joy to be able to prepare this plate of fruit so that it looks appetizing, so that it's balanced, and that it gives her satisfaction because she's a big fan of fruit. I like fruit. I'm not a huge aficionado of fruit, and I've been doing this for probably the last year since I actually secured this blender. And I began to look at the way I was organizing the fruit on the plate. Were there too many strawberries? Were they cut in half or cut in quarters? If I use a portion of the banana in the smoothie, will that leave her enough banana for her amazing taste buds that crave bananas on a regular basis? If I use blueberries and in the hopes of, extracting the antioxidants from the blueberries, am I giving her enough and leaving enough for the smoothie? And it's like this sort of balancing game that I played out. And I do think that this disease has, and I've mentioned this to Donna, so I don't feel like I'm saying anything that I haven't told her. I do think that to a certain extent, it has robbed her of the ability to express empathy. And so I think that part of the issue that I've discussed with others is the fact that you, as a caregiver, you do things very unconditionally, and you learn that maybe getting thank yous, sometimes they're not going to happen. They're not going to come as often. I mean, when I go and visit my friends Ron and Gary in Kentucky, I'm really kind of amazed at how much they thank each other for doing things for each other. And I think Don and I were kind of like that, but it's much less so. And it took a while for me to wrap my head around the fact that I could do 5, 6, 7, 8 things, and the chances of getting a thank you were probably going to be fairly remote. And I blame that specifically on this disease because that is generally not a part of her personality. But the other day, I really took extra care in arranging and cutting this fruit. And without any idea that I was going to get anything in return, it just seemed like I wanted it to look good. And when I carried it over and put it in front of her with her napkin, which is customary as she was, reading the newspaper on her iPad, that this is going to be, an enjoyable experience. And so I did just that. And several minutes later, I was cleaning up in the kitchen, and she said, "Hey, you." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Thank you for doing this fruit." And it just reminded me that sometimes these little small things that we maybe are not so grateful for need to be reemphasized. And it also reminded me that they need to be reemphasized without anybody saying anything. So in a way, I need to be better continuing to do things unconditionally without needing to be thanked and without needing to be appreciated. And that's tough. It's been a while since I have had to try to wrap my head around this. Now, does this joy received from being appreciated for doing something as minute, seemingly, as cutting up the fruit during breakfast for a loved one, does it compare to the thrill of riding a motorcycle? The answer is no. But I think I've learned on this gratitude journey, at least a little bit, that there does come a time when you can't really attach like a level of importance to any one thing. Like, to me, they all have to live in their own world and be balanced. And this thrill of riding a motorcycle might seem fairly magnanimous, like there's no way that anything could compare to that. But that little twinge of joy and bliss that I received from being appreciated for cutting up the fruit was probably the best twinge of joy I've felt since embarking on a day like today, going out on my Triumph Tiger 800 and meeting up with Brad and going for a ride. So while the experiences aren't the same, the result did give me pause to wonder and to think. At the radio station where I work, there are some people who are motorcycle riders, and I've talked to them a little bit about what's kind of going on with us and how much I miss riding a motorcycle, both as an escape and as a hobby and as a joy, and the fact that the chances are great that I will not participate in that sport, that hobby again, because it just feels like I need to be around. I need to take care of myself. I need to put myself in the best possible position, to care for the person who I love. And that would be, on the surface, yes, that would be a luxury that I cannot afford. And of course, they nod and they say, "Hey, I'm going to be on the lookout for you for a bike." And I'm like, "Yeah, I appreciate that, but it's just not something that's in the cards." "Well, hey, you could step out on a curb in front of a bus and put yourself in the same position." I said, "I know. I buy theoretically the logic of your argument. It's just that I would never be able to forgive myself as I'm cruising down the back road in Amish country, enjoying this day, knowing that I am putting myself in this position wholeheartedly, with full intent, only for my own joy and satisfaction." But man, oh man, would that feel good today? No doubt about that. I feel like I need to cut up a couple of extra plates of fruit to try to make up for that. So I hope, as we get into the dog days of summer, even though many people out west have already been in the dog days of summer, that we try to find ways to satisfy those things that maybe we don't do anymore or can't do anymore. And while they may not equal what we've done in the past or what we've experienced in the past, that we try to derive joy out of the unconditional part of it, which, yes, is a challenge and is tough and is a journey in itself. But hopefully it's worth the effort to do it. Here's hoping that you're well and that I have more information on the next episode about sort of the video version. And the video version really is my attempt to get onto more platforms that aren't just audio related. And I know I'm not telling you anything new, that video in all its forms is the way to expand one's reach if they have a channel of any sort. So hopefully I'll have more information about that, because I think this gratitude thing is pretty important. And nevertheless, here's hoping the weather situation in your part of the world is equally as epic as it is here. And here's a big thank you to you for downloading and listening to another episode of the Gratitude Journal podcast.